Okay, 7th grade. So today we are in our writing packets. So as always, we're starting with a journal entry. We are going to do a little bit of jumping around here today, and there is going to be a little bit of a different order of things. Just because you'll see here in a minute, there's just some stuff messed up with this lesson they have planned here for today. So we're going to be doing 2 journals, but we'll still only be doing 1 lesson and 1 set of questions. But there is 2 journals for today. So you can go ahead. You don't have to do both. You can do both if you want to, but just pick whichever one you would rather do. So the first option is journal entry 5, which asked you if you could go anywhere in the world, where would you want to go? Explain what's so appealing about that location. What would you want to see, and what would you want to do while you were there? So, obviously this is if there was nothing keeping us from traveling right now. If you could go anywhere, money is not an object, where would you want to go and why would you want to go there? The key is you also need to explain why you want to go there, what you want to do, what you want to see, that sort of thing. So as always, this is 1 paragraph or 5 to 7 sentences, because a paragraph is 5 to 7 sentences. So you can pick between this one and journal entry 6. Now we're skipping over pages 21 and 22 because if you look at this and you've been following along with us, you'll know this is looking really familiar, the different types of sentences, because this exact lesson and this exact page is in our reading packet. So we've already done this. So we're going to go ahead and skip over 21 and 22 because this is the same exact thing that was in our reading packet. So the second option for your journal entry is journal entry 6, which is on page 23. So you can either choose page 20 or 23. 23 says, write a journal entry describing one of your days from the perspective of someone or something else. An example of that would be a pet, someone who lives with you, a sibling, your parents. Make sure you're using adjectives and descriptive words that help the reader feel like they can imagine the day. So you're describing a day in your life, but written like you're someone else. So like if you were looking into your life from the outside. So using adjectives, those are descriptive words like fast, ugly, pretty, fun, boring, that sort of thing. Descriptive words, same thing, that help your reader. Try using, which we went over this in the reading packet, but try using these different types of sentences. So try not using all simple sentences, but using a mix of those compound and complex and compound complex sentences. So you'll write 5 to 7 sentences from the perspective of someone else in your life. So let's look at page 24. This is the practice we'll be doing together today. We're talking about commas with coordinate adjectives. And we're going to talk a little bit about this. This is a new topic that we haven't covered yet. So when you're using more than one adjective, which first of all, what is an adjective? An adjective, like we just talked about, is those descriptive words to describe a noun. So like the boring, pretty, here we have brave, first would be an adjective, that sort of thing. So first, second, third, just anything that describes the noun in more detail would be an adjective. So when you use more than one adjective to describe a noun, sometimes those adjectives need a comma between them, but sometimes they don't. So if you think about when we use commas, sometimes we use commas when we're making a list, right? So if you said, I need bread, comma, eggs, comma, and milk at the store. You're using those commas to list off the things you need. So similarly, when you're using coordinate adjectives, more than one adjective, sometimes those need to be separated by a comma because you're listing off adjectives. So in this first example, it says, if the adjectives make sense no matter what order you put them in, they are called coordinate adjectives. Coordinate adjectives must be separated by a comma. So at first you're thinking, why wouldn't all of them make sense no matter what order you put them in? No, and we'll explain that. So it says the Civil War was captured on film by brave, dedicated photographers. Here is where you're listing off those adjectives, so you're using more than one, so you have that comma in there to create a list of those adjectives. So they're brave and dedicated. You could also say the Civil War was captured on film by dedicated, brave photographers, because it makes sense no matter what order you put them in. Now, an example where they wouldn't make sense is this middle one here. It says the Civil War was the first major conflict to be widely photographed. There's no comma needed here. Well, why not? Because if you said the major first conflict, that wouldn't make any sense, because first is describing the order in which it happened. So first major conflict. Both of those are adjectives, but first almost describes, it's almost describing major also. So first or second or third or fourth, words like that would go at the beginning. So you don't need a comma in those situations. Now the last one says in a series of 3 or more adjectives, some might be coordinate adjectives and others might not. Put in commas only where they're needed. So many, in this sentence, the photos offered many fascinating realistic images of wartime. Many is also an adjective, but it's saying many fascinating realistic images of wartime. You could also say many realistic, fascinating images of wartime. Because many, again, it's almost like many is describing fascinating, or first is describing major. So there's no comma needed there. But in between these two adjectives, you do need to add a comma. So let's take a look at our guided practice together here. So correct each sentence by adding and deleting commas as needed. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a bunch of commas over here, and then we will drag them where we need them. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I just went ahead and put some commas over on the side here that I'll just drag in wherever we need them at. And then we'll take out any commas where there doesn't need to be a comma. I'll just put an X over those. So it says, the Civil War proved to be a remarkable, or let's read the hint first, I'm sorry. If you can add the word and between the adjective, this is a really good hint, then they are coordinate adjectives and must be separated by commas. So if it makes sense to add the word and in between it, then that would make it a coordinate adjective, which means that you need to put a comma where you would put that and at. So the Civil War proved to be a remarkable, important moment in the history of photography. So if you looked here, what are the words that are those descriptive or adjective words? Remarkable and important, right? So if we said the Civil War proved to be a remarkable and important moment in the history of photography, the Civil War proved to be a remarkable and important moment in the history of photography. That makes sense with an and there. So all we need to do is go ahead and insert a comma in between remarkable and important. Because here we're just listing off those. It doesn't matter what order they go in. You could say the Civil War proved to be an important, remarkable moment in the history of photography. That also makes sense. So photographers had to carry their heavy, bulky camera equipment with them as they traveled. So here we have a comma after bulky. Now we have heavy and bulky. Now also here, camera could be seen as an adjective here because it's describing the type of equipment, but camera equipment is really just our adjective altogether. But here we have heavy and bulky. Now that comma does belong after bulky, so we're going to go ahead and leave this comma here because, again, camera is almost our third descriptive word. So we're going to go ahead and leave that comma. Now where do we need to add a comma at? In between heavy and bulky. Because if you said photographers had to carry their heavy and bulky camera equipment with them as they traveled, that makes sense. So the picture showed young, tired, wounded soldiers surviving in difficult wartime conditions. So we have a comma after young, tired, and a comma after difficult. Do those commas belong there? Yes, because it's saying difficult and wartime conditions. And then tired and wounded, those are types of soldiers. Now, young is our other descriptive word. So we need to add another comma right in there. So the fourth one says the photographers inspired numerous future news journalists. So if we had the photographers inspired numerous, comma, future, comma, news journalists. There, do we need to add or delete anything? No, because numerous and future are both descriptive words. News is also a descriptive word for journalists. So all of those belong in front of it. We do not need to add or take away any commas there. It just all stays the same. So the last one says the many terrible dangers of war were depicted, but so were the strong, courageous acts of leadership. So we have depicted, comma, but that's just because we have a compound sentence, not because the comma has nothing to do with these coordinating adjectives. So the comma is just there because it's a compound sentence. Now at the end we have strong, courageous acts of leadership. If you said strong and courageous acts of leadership, that would make sense. So where does our comma go? It's going to go in between strong and courageous. So now you guys are going to take a look at page 25 on your own. It's going to ask you to say if they need to be rewritten. If it's already right, just put D. If not, choose the option that is the correct version. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, please contact me during office hours. And remember that you can choose between journal entry 6 or journal entry 5, or you can do both if you really want to. But we're skipping over pages 21 and 22 because we've already done those in our reading packet.